Hey, what's up guys, this is Tristan, and for those of you who don't know, Viz Media recently published a Dragon Ball fan comic about Yamcha, and this interests me a lot because since I first became a manga fan, I've never really heard of a fan comic being officially published, especially by a big company like Viz Media, and this wasn't even just a small thing. I mean, this was on the Shonen Jump app, it was digital, it was in print copies, it's at Barnes & Noble, you can pretty much find it everywhere. And overall, I was pretty impressed with how much leverage this was getting. So long story short, since Dragon Ball is one of my favorites, I decided to check this out on the Shonen Jump app. I read it 100% legally, and wow. Woo-wee! This comic was wild. Since this manga is primarily about the character Yamcha though, I want to give a little bit of background about my thoughts on the character, because this character, Yamcha, is considered one of the most hated and useless characters in all of Dragon Ball. But as for my take on Yamcha, I actually thought that he is a pretty decent character in early Dragon Ball. I thought that his dynamic with Puar and Bulma were pretty decent, and overall he really added just a nice dynamic to the characters, and he was a pretty nice addition to the main cast. And as for him being a useless character, I mean, you guys saw him at the Tenkaichi Budokai tournaments. I mean, he was pretty strong there. I mean, let's not lie to ourselves. I mean, Yamcha is one of the strongest fighters in the very early tournaments of Dragon Ball, but as the rest of the characters kept getting stronger, Yamcha just didn't really become on the same level as the rest of them, so he wasn't really needed, and compared to aliens and demons and all that stuff, he was pretty weak in comparison. And I think that this problem with Yamcha got especially ridiculous in the Android saga when he was fighting Android 20 and he just got completely destroyed by him, and then all the Z fighters were like, oh man, even Yamcha lost, what are we gonna do? Like, yeah, no shit, it's Yamcha. Compared to Goku and all those other guys, he might as well just pack his bags and go home, because those characters are just on an entirely separate level than Yamcha, that it just makes him look so much weaker in comparison. And I don't think that Yamcha's an entirely bad character. I think that he's pretty decent and he's pretty strong, but he was just never fully utilized, and compared to the other characters, he doesn't really serve much of a purpose in the fights. So this comic starts off with this guy walking around with his friends, and they're all big Dragon Ball fans. I mean, they're talking about this Dragon Ball event that's coming up, and suddenly, out of nowhere, he trips down some stairs and dies. So fellas, can I get a rest in pepperonis in the chat? Now this manga's actually pretty straightforward. I mean, there's not really much depth to the story besides what the title suggests, but I actually do really like it. I mean, it's pretty funny, it's pretty stupid, but it's just a fun manga if you're a Dragon Ball fan. And what I was saying earlier about Yamcha being known as a pretty useless and hated character, I mean, a lot of those jabs are kind of thrown at Yamcha throughout this manga, and I thought that was pretty funny because I wasn't really expecting to see that in a manga that's officially published by Viz Media. And overall, this manga just has a lot of really solid comedy, and it's not nearly as funny as early Dragon Ball. I mean, if you really liked early Dragon Ball comedy and you're expecting something similar to that, you're probably going to be kind of disappointed because it's definitely not nearly as funny as that. But there are some moments in the series where I was having a grin on my face, and I did really enjoy reading this manga. But it wasn't a hoot and a holler or anything like that. I wasn't laughing my ass off like I was when reading early Dragon Ball. So don't have your expectations that high, but nonetheless, it still is pretty funny, and it does have a lot of great slapstick moments. This manga reminds me a lot of the movies Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure and National Treasure.
I'm gonna steal the Declaration of Independence.
In the sense that all those things are pretty stupid and pretty ridiculous, but they're just a blast and they're pretty enjoyable. And if you're going into this manga expecting the holy scripts of manga or some great Dragon Ball story that's pretty profound and has a lot of nuance, you're gonna be disappointed. But if you go into this just expecting something kind of stupid and pretty fun, I mean, you're gonna have a blast with it. As for the artwork in the series, I wasn't really expecting much going into it, but I was actually really impressed with it because it looks a lot like Akira Toriyama's art style, and that's pretty impressive. For an amateur artist looking like one of the greatest mangakas of all time, I mean, that's definitely one of the biggest compliments someone could receive. And if I'm being completely honest, I definitely think that the art in this manga is a lot better than Toyotara's art style in the Dragon Ball Super manga. And for the most part, I mean, this art style looks so similar to Toriyama's art style that if you took a screenshot or a picture of this manga and showed it to someone, they'd probably just assume it was a picture drawn by Akira Toriyama in the early stages of Dragon Ball, or they would just assume that it's drawn by an assistant or something like that if they didn't know much about this manga. Now, there were some characters such as Chaozu or Cell where they did look different than the characters they were based off of, but I didn't mind that because overall, I mean, it still looked pretty clean. Now, when I was reading this manga, I thought that the story was pretty messed up. How it was basically about a middle schooler who died and abandoned his previous life to become a Dragon Ball character. But I mean, that whole thing was pretty much resolved at the end and it had a happy ending, so if you're expecting it to just end at a pretty dark note, I mean, it's not going to go that route. Anyways, guys, that's pretty much it for this video. If you enjoyed, make sure to slap the subscribe button, slap that like button, drop a comment letting me know what you think of this video or this manga. And with all that being said, I will see you guys in the next video.